The second episode of the Mandalorian series saw Bo-Katan become the star of the show as she rescued Din Djarin and Grogu from numerous sticky situations. This episode saw Din Djarin and Bo-Katan venture into the mines of Mandalore to find the sacred waters in order for Din Djarin to bathe in them and redeem himself in the eyes of the tribe. While he was completing the ritual, he was violently dragged underwater after Bo-Katan rescued him. We caught sight of the culprit, the legendary beast known as Mythosaur. As seen in this episode, it's a kaiju-sized underwater creature that's an essential, almost sacred part of the Mandalorian culture. A Mythosaur skull is the sigil of the Mandalorian people, and it has been inextricably tied to the culture since Boba Fett's live-action debut in 1980's The Empire Strikes Back. You can clearly see a Mythosaur skull sigil on Fett's left pauldron in his film appearance. As their name implies, Mythosaurs were more part of Mandalorian myth than reality. Mandalorians know they existed because their fossils have been found. You can even see one in person at Galaxy's Edge. But they were believed to be long extinct, and whether or not you believe the story of Mandalore the Great taming the Mythosaur of the living waters depends on how religious you are. This underwater encounter confirms that Mythosaurs were real. They do reside in the living waters, and at least one of them is very much alive. As Bo-Katan rescues Djarin from the depths of the living waters, she comes face to face with a gigantic creature. The survival of the Mythosaur could mean a few different things for the future of Mandalore, although all of these are just theories at this point. During her conversation with Djarin, Bo-Katan calls for the unification of the surviving Mandalorians. So, could Mythosaur be a symbol of the planet rebuilding in the future? Maybe this time with Bo-Katan once again as its leader. It could surely serve as a redemption arc for the former leader after the terrors of the Great Purge. And on that note, some have wondered whether the Mythosaur sensed the presence of the true ruler of Mandalore. The biggest theory at the moment, though, is a simple prediction that we're going to see Grogu manage to tame the Mythosaur and allow Djarin to ride it as the ancient Mandalorians did. Whether that would relate to any larger meaning for Mandalore remains to be seen, but that would definitely be awesome to watch. What exactly is a Mythosaur? Where do they come from, and why do Mandalorians hold the creature in such high regard, and how did it all fall into myth and legend, only to resurface thousands of years later in its latest sighting in this third season? The Mythosaur, a massive reptilian creature that served as a symbol of the Mandalorian people. According to legend, the first Mandalore defeated a Mythosaur in single combat, and from that day forward, the creature was a symbol of the Mandalorians' strength and tenacity. Mandalorian armor frequently featured the skull of a Mythosaur as a symbol of the wearer's allegiance to Mandalorian culture. For a little while now, the Mandalorian in the book of Boba Fett had been subtly foreshadowing and telegraphing the arrival of the Mythosaur beast into the Star Wars canon, but for most of us, we didn't think it would actually happen. However, going back and watching, we can see several clues now that point us in the direction of the Mythosaur. And its appearance from Kuiil chiding Din Djarin about how his Mandalorian ancestors rode the mighty beast to the armorer, mentioning them fading into myth and legend. Now, in the future, all of these hints line up, but some questions still remain. Let's attempt to divulge all these questions as we figure out what this now means moving forward to see how Mandalorian's third season could potentially play out. The year is 7000 BBY. The galaxy is a very different place, and across the stars, the Jedi are having their second great schism. But far from them, in even deeper space, there are a people group known as the Tong, who are just now arriving on a mysterious lush planet that is teeming with life. The Tong are the ancient alien ancestors of what soon would become the Mandalorian people during this era of great discovery. A leader of the Tong people would rise up and lead them to a bright future when he brought them onto his brand new world. This Tong leader's name was Mandalore, and he would go down in history as Mandalore the First. In canon, however, they call him Mandalore the Great, which is who Bo-Katan was talking about when she read off the ancient tablet deep within the mines. To keep with canon continuity and to avoid confusion, we'll continue calling him Mandalore the Great. Anyway, Mandalore the Great would lead his people on a crusade against the dominant species of this fresh new planet, which of course were the Mythosaurs. This beast's claim to fame was its legendary size, as the monster was notably the size of a small city. The closest land beast that we can compare this to is the Zillo beast, and there is a good possibility that the Mythosaur far outclasses the Zillo beast in terms of both mass and length, as well as power. While we, unfortunately, do not know much about the Mythosaur physiology, we do know that they were incredibly powerful monsters, and that the Tong would use them to test their skills as warriors. Mandalore the Great would be the first one who ever killed the Mythosaur in combat, and I would like to point out that this was before the Tong people had the weapons of modern society's weapons, like the Mandalorians would one day use. Instead, though, he used axes, swords, and shields with it, likely taking Mandalore the Great days, if not weeks, to chop away at the massive beast. Following this, the rest of the Tong people would basically hunt them to near extinction, claiming the new planet as their own, and following this, the people would take upon themselves a new name, known as the Children of Mandalore, in order to honor their brave leader. They also went as far as completely naming the new planet after him as well, Mandalore. And since this day, the skull of the Mythosaur became the insignia of the Mandalorian creed. But there is much more to the Mythosaur than just rites of passage. The very first Mandalorian helmet was carved for Mandalore the Great out of the skull of a Mythosaur, which was almost as hard as Beskar armor. This mask would actually be passed down from one Mandalore to another for thousands of years, doing so as the symbol of their supremacy, as this was an era long before the time of the arrival of the Darksaber. However, the mask was lost to history, and the Mandalorians had no symbol for their leader until, of course, Tar Vizsla arrived on the scene with the Dark, the first ever Mandalorian to be inducted into the Jedi Order. The legacy of the Mythosaur, though, was intrinsically tied with the Mandalorian people's culture, and no matter what tribe or clan one belonged to, all of them bore the skull of the Mythosaur on their armor. The ancient Mandalorians, for hundreds of years, would test their skill as warriors and in combat by hunting and killing the Mythosaur, but soon it seems that this went for a very different route in the Star Wars canon. Eventually, the Mandalorians took to taming and riding these ancient beasts, as we know from Kuil's story to Din Djarin. This, of course, wasn't the first or only beast that the Mandalorians were known for riding, but it was by far the most famous and deadly. It seems, though, that the Mythosaurs were extinct from all the hunting of their species, and, as we are told by the armorer, eventually fact faded to fiction, as the tale of the Mythosaur was lost to legend and mythology. But that's not all the armorer said. She had also mentioned in passing that the reemergence of the Mythosaur would usher in a new age for Mandalore, yet another cryptic foreshadowing. And this brings us to our next point. What does it mean now that the Mythosaur has returned? First, though, how did it return? Our theory is that this Mythosaur is the last of its kind and hadn't been discovered before because it has been in deep hibernation resting far down in the heart of Mandalore, but was suddenly awakened during the Empire's bombing of the world, an attack which shook the surface so violently that the Mythosaur emerged from its great slumber. The implications of its arrival are absolutely necessary for the show, as Season 3 of The Mandalorian seems to be focusing a lot on the ruler of Mandalore and the leader that will one day bring their people back together. The discovery of the last Mythosaur is continuing to hammer home the theme of leadership. The very foundation of Mandalorian leadership was represented by the skull of this beast, which was forged into the first helmet, and it's clear that the Mandalorian culture is about to change forever. Some of the signs have already happened, with Grogu deciding to go and be within Joran to become a Mandalorian rather than a Jedi, and even though Grogu has left the Jedi way, he is still growing powerful in the Force. Could it be possible that Grogu is the key to taming the Mythosaur, as he has shown great power over the minds of beasts in the past? But who eventually will lead Mandalore and tame the Mythosaur? Bo-Katan and Din Djarin are head-to-head. Both of them discovered the Mythosaur together. They both have somewhat of a desire to rule, but also have hesitation towards it at the same time. For the time being, Din and Bo are working together, but clearly it's leading towards a barreling collision course, and it's unknown right now what that collision will be moving forward. But hey, until that happens, we'll wait and see. What do you think of the Mythosaur's arrival? Are you excited to see what is coming up next for Din Djarin and Bo-Katan in their rivalry? And who do you hope to see eventually take the rightful throne of Mandalore? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give us a like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this.